Part 1. Silent Departure of Humanity. And the stars braced for war. The observation deck was quiet except for the soft hum of machinery. Jake Morrison stood with his hands behind his back, watching the colony ships leave Earth's orbit one by one. Each vessel carried thousands of people toward destinations that even he did not know. The coordinates were encrypted and hidden, locked away in files that only a handful of people could access. 6 months had passed since the evacuation began. To the rest of the galaxy, it looked like routine expansion. Humans moving to new colonies, exploring new worlds, doing what they had always done. Nobody suspected the truth. Nobody knew that humanity was abandoning everything they had built over 300 years. Admiral Helen Brooks walked into the observation deck. She looked tired. The past year had aged her in ways that went beyond physical appearance. She carried a weight that few people could understand. In her hands were the intelligence reports that had started everything. Reports that confirmed what humanity had feared for years. The Galactic Council was planning to eliminate them. "The last civilian transport leaves tomorrow," Helen said. Her voice was steady but quiet. "After that, only military personnel remain." Jake nodded. He looked down at Earth below. The planet glowed blue and green in the darkness of space. Cities sparkled with lights. Oceans reflected the sun. Everything looked peaceful and normal. In 2 days, it would all be empty. Every city, every town, every orbital station would stand vacant and silent. "Do you think they'll notice right away?" Jake asked. Helen smiled, but there was no humor in it. "They're arrogant. They think we're weak and predictable. They'll notice when it's too late." For 3 centuries, humanity had been part of the Galactic Council. They had traded with alien species, shared technology, and followed the rules. Humans were considered decent soldiers, but nothing special. Their diplomats were mediocre. Their traders were unremarkable. They occupied 12 systems in the outer rim of the galaxy, far from the core worlds where the powerful species lived. But the Council had made a mistake. They had underestimated humanity completely. What the Council did not know was that humanity had been preparing for this day since they first joined galactic civilization. Every piece of technology the Council shared, humanity reverse-engineered and improved. Every trade route they learned, humanity memorized and mapped alternatives. Every friendship they made, humanity quietly gathered intelligence. In the dark spaces between stars where no Council ships ever traveled, humanity had built secret shipyards. They constructed research stations inside dense nebulae where sensors could not reach. They established weapons development facilities in the galactic void where nobody ever went. For 300 years, humanity had been building a second military, one that the Council knew nothing about. "The Ghost Fleet is ready?" Jake asked. 2,000 warships, all staffed and waiting in the Kepler abyss," Helen answered. "Another 3,000 automated defense platforms are scattered across our fallback positions. Everything is in place." She paused and her expression darkened. "And the Nova Protocol is ready too." Jake said nothing. The Nova Protocol was humanity's final insurance policy. It was a weapon so devastating that even discussing it was forbidden. The details were classified above top secret. Only a handful of people knew what it could do. But everyone who knew understood one thing clearly. If humanity fell, they would not fall alone. "God willing, we'll never need to use it," Helen added quietly. Jake understood. The Nova Protocol was not meant to win wars. It was meant to ensure that attacking humanity would cost more than anyone was willing to pay. It was the ultimate deterrent, the final warning. "Destroy us and we will take you with us." The plan was called Silent Departure, and it was humanity's greatest gamble. Instead of waiting for the Council to strike, humanity would disappear. They would evacuate every world, every station, every outpost. They would vanish completely, leaving the Council to wonder where they had gone and what they were planning. During those months of searching, humanity would be establishing new colonies far from Council space. They would be preparing defenses in locations the Council could never find. And when the Council finally realized what had happened, humanity would be ready for war. It was insane. It was desperate. But it was also the only chance they had. The intelligence reports had been clear. The Council's leadership had been discussing the human problem for years. Some species feared humanity's rapid technological advancement. Others worried about human aggression and unpredictability. There had been classified meetings, secret debates, and contingency plans drawn up for human containment. In the worst-case scenarios, the plans called for elimination. Helen had seen the reports herself. A spy within the Council's intelligence network had risked everything to get them to humanity. The evidence was undeniable. The Council was planning to act soon, perhaps within a year. They would manufacture some diplomatic crisis, some incident that would justify military action. Then they would move to eliminate humanity before humans became too powerful to stop. "Do you think this will work?" Jake asked. "Do you think we can actually pull this off?" Helen looked at him for a long moment. "I think we don't have a choice. If we stay, we die. If we run and they catch us, we die. But if we disappear completely and make them come looking for us on our terms, then maybe we have a chance." She turned back to the window. Another colony ship was departing, its engines glowing as it accelerated away from Earth. "We spent 300 years learning from them. We studied every species in the Council. We know their strengths and weaknesses. We know how they fight, how they think, how they make decisions. They know almost nothing about us because we've been careful to appear ordinary." Jake smiled slightly. "We've been playing weak." "Exactly," Helen said. "And now they're about to find out what humans are really capable of." Below them, Earth continued to empty. Families boarded transports with what they could carry. Scientists dismantled laboratories and loaded equipment onto cargo ships. Soldiers prepared their weapons and checked their gear one last time. Everyone knew what was coming. Everyone understood the risk, but nobody complained. Nobody refused. When humanity's survival was at stake, humans had always found a way to come together. They had done it on Earth countless times throughout history. Now they would do it again, but this time on a galactic scale. The silent departure was not just an evacuation, it was a statement. Humanity would not wait to be victims. They would not beg for mercy from a council that had already decided their fate. Instead, they would disappear into the darkness and prepare for war. And when the council came looking for them, they would find something they never expected. Not weak refugees running scared, but an enemy that had been preparing for this fight for 300 years. Jake watched another ship depart, carrying the last children from Earth's southern continents. "After tomorrow, Earth will be empty for the first time in 200,000 years. Helen nodded. "But not forever. When this is over, they'll come home. We all will." "You really believe that?" "I have to," Helen said simply. "Because if I don't believe we can win, then what are we even fighting for?" The observation deck fell silent again. Outside, the stars waited. Somewhere out there, the Galactic Council continued their daily business, unaware that everything was about to change. They thought they were the hunters preparing to eliminate a threat. They did not realize they were about to become the prey. Part 2. Silent Departure of Humanity. And the stars braced for war. 3 weeks after humanity's silent departure, Ambassador Zrill of the Korthan Dominion noticed something was wrong. His trade convoy had arrived at Earth expecting to negotiate a new shipping contract. The Korthans had been trading with humans for decades. It was routine business, nothing unusual, but when his ships entered the Sol system, everything felt strange. The communication channels were silent. No traffic control responded to their hails. No merchant ships moved between the planets. The entire system felt dead. Drill ordered his convoy to approach Earth cautiously. As they entered orbit, his crew began scanning the surface. What they found made no sense. The cities were intact and fully powered. The lights were on. The technology was functioning. But there were no life signs. Not a single human anywhere on the planet. Drill sent landing parties to investigate. They found homes with food still in refrigerators. Offices with computers still running. Vehicles parked neatly in garages. Everything looked normal except for one impossible detail. Every human was gone. The ambassador immediately contacted the Galactic Council. His report caused chaos. Within hours, emergency sessions were called. Delegations from every member species gathered on the Council homeworld of Zentara Prime. The questions came fast and urgent. Where had humanity gone? Why had they left? What did it mean? Counselor Vex was a saurian, a reptilian species that had long distrusted humans. He stood before the Council assembly and spoke with barely hidden satisfaction. "This is clearly preparation for aggression. Humanity has abandoned their homeworld to hide their military forces. They are planning an attack on Council space. We must find them immediately." General Croth of the Draknor Empire disagreed. The Draknor were warriors who had fought humans in 3 border skirmishes. They knew humans better than most. If they wanted war, they would have struck already. This is something else. Humans do not run from fights. When cornered, they attack. This is different. The Council deployed scout fleets to every known human colony. What they discovered was even more disturbing. All 12 human systems were abandoned. Billions of people had simply vanished. They had left behind functional cities, working technology, and absolutely no clues about where they had gone. It was as if an entire species had learned to become ghosts. Lyra Kent watched the Council proceedings from the shadows. She was one of the few humans who had remained behind, working as a deep-cover agent within the Council's intelligence network. Her mission was almost complete. Soon she would need to disappear as well before her identity was discovered. The Council's science minister, a Corthan mathematician named Prell, presented his analysis. We have examined resource consumption data from the past 2 years. Humanity has been stockpiling supplies for an exodus of this magnitude. They have also been reducing their trade dependencies, becoming more self-sufficient. This was not a sudden decision. This was planned years in advance. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Counselor Vex's voice cut through the quiet. Then we must find them immediately and neutralize this threat before they are fully prepared for whatever they are planning. Prell spoke carefully. Or we could consider why they felt the need to leave. Humanity has been a cooperative member of the Council for 3 centuries. What changed that made them want to abandon everything? Nobody wanted to answer that question, because everyone in the chamber knew the truth, even if they would not say it aloud. The Council had been discussing the human problem in classified sessions for years. They had debated containment strategies. They had drawn up contingency plans. In some scenarios, they had discussed elimination. Lyra watched as understanding slowly appeared on the faces around the chamber. Humanity had not left to hide. They had left because they knew what was coming. They had discovered the Council's plans, and that meant humanity's intelligence network was far better than anyone had realized. The Council's response was swift and massive. They assembled the largest military fleet in galactic history, 200,000 warships from 30 different species, all dedicated to one mission: find humanity and bring them back under Council authority. They called it the Unification Fleet, though many privately referred to it as the Extermination Armada. Admiral Corvus, a decorated Zentaran commander, was given command. He was known for his tactical brilliance and ruthless efficiency. He divided his massive fleet into 20 separate hunter groups. Each group was assigned to search a different sector of the galaxy. The Council's strategists had analyzed human behavior patterns and resource requirements. They calculated the most probable destinations for human colonies. Surely an entire species could not hide forever. They needed food, water, fuel, and raw materials. Eventually, humanity would have to reveal itself. But weeks turned into months, and the hunter groups found nothing. Every lead disappeared. Every trail went cold. The humans had vanished so completely that some species began to whisper that they had left the galaxy entirely. Perhaps they had fled to the Magellanic Clouds or beyond, leaving known space behind forever. Then came the first incident. Hunter Group 7 was commanded by Captain Drax, a Saurian officer known for his aggression. His fleet consisted of 1,500 warships, more than enough to handle any human force they might encounter. Drax had been searching the Void Sector, an empty region of space that most ships avoided. There were no resources there, no planets worth colonizing. It was just empty darkness between the stars. But Drax's sensors detected unusual energy signatures. His science officer identified them as human power generation systems. They had found a research station, apparently abandoned in haste. Equipment was still running. Data banks were still active. It was exactly what they had been looking for. Finally, Drax hissed to his first officer. We found them. All ships. Prepare to secure the station and extract data from their computers. Today we learn where humanity is hiding. The Saurian fleet moved into attack formation. Drax felt satisfaction as his ships surrounded the station. This would be his victory, his moment of glory. He would be the one who found humanity's secrets. Then space came alive. From the darkness between the stars, human warships appeared. They had been hiding using stealth technology that Council sensors could not detect. The small research station had been bait, a trap left waiting for someone to find. And Captain Drax had taken it. The humans did not appear gradually. They did not decloak one at a time. Instead, 3,000 warships materialized simultaneously in perfect formation, completely surrounding the Saurian fleet. Drax had brought 1,500 ships to capture what he thought was an abandoned station. He had flown into an ambush with twice his numbers. The battle lasted 17 minutes. The human ships moved with coordination that seemed impossible. They acted as a single organism, each vessel perfectly positioned to support the others. Their weapons were unlike anything the Council had encountered before. Energy beams that bypassed shields as if they were not there. Missiles that could not be intercepted or jammed. Electronic warfare systems that shut down entire battle groups in seconds. The Saurian fleet tried to fight back. They tried to retreat. They tried everything they had been trained to do. Nothing worked. The humans dismantled them with surgical precision, destroying ships faster than Drax could even count the losses. In the final moments, as his flagship broke apart around him, Captain Drax managed to activate his automated distress beacon. The recording captured everything: the perfect ambush, the overwhelming firepower, the complete and total defeat. The beacon transmitted one last image before the flagship exploded. A human warship, sleek and deadly with words painted on its hull. The name was Retribution. The recording reached Zentara Prime 3 days later. The council chamber erupted into chaos when they saw it. Some species called for immediate withdrawal, arguing that humanity was clearly more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. Others demanded revenge, claiming the council's authority had been challenged and must be restored through force. But in the Kepler abyss, in a hidden base that no council scout had ever found, Admiral Helen Brooks watched the recording with satisfaction. Commander Danny Ward stood beside her. He had led the ambush from the bridge of the Retribution. "One message sent," Danny said quietly. "Do you think they understood it?" Helen smiled. "They're beginning to. The council thought we were weak because we seemed cooperative. They thought we were unprepared because we seemed peaceful. They're learning the truth now." "What truth is that?" "That humanity was never weak," Helen said. "We were patient. We spent 3 centuries learning everything we could about them. And when they came hunting for us, we were ready." Danny looked at the tactical display showing council fleet movements across the galaxy. "They're not going to stop. Losing one hunter group will only make them more determined." "I know," Helen said, "but now they're afraid. And fear makes people make mistakes. Every mistake they make gives us another advantage." She turned to face her command staff. "Send the message to all our forces. The war has begun. But we fight it on our terms, in our time, in places we choose. The council wanted to hunt us. Now they're going to learn what it means to be hunted by humans." Part 3. Silent Departure of Humanity. And the stars braced for war. The destruction of Hunter Group 7 changed everything. The Galactic Council had expected a quick resolution to the human problem. They had expected to find scattered refugees desperate and easy to control. Instead, they had found an enemy that could not be located and could not be defeated when discovered. Admiral Corvus stood in the command center on Zentara Prime, staring at the tactical display. Red markers showed where council forces were searching. Empty space stared back at him. Weeks had passed since the ambush, and his hunter groups had found nothing. No human bases, no colony worlds, no supply depots. It was as if billions of people had simply dissolved into the void. But the reports coming in told a different story. Council supply convoys were disappearing without a trace. Communications relays in remote sectors were being sabotaged. Listening posts went dark, their crews vanishing before they could send distress signals. Humanity was not hiding. They were waging a campaign of strategic disruption, slowly bleeding the Council's ability to coordinate their massive fleet. General Greg Parker led many of these operations. His stealth carrier, the Shadow, could appear anywhere without warning. His specialty was hitting targets the Council thought were secure, proving that humanity could strike whenever and wherever they chose. Mining operations, fuel depots, shipyards. Each attack was surgical and devastating. The psychological effect was profound. The Korthan Dominion began pulling ships back to defend their home territory. The Draknor Empire demanded more resources for their sectors. Species that had been united under Council leadership now argued among themselves, each one prioritizing their own safety over the collective mission. Councillor Vex watched the unity of the Council crumble. He had pushed for this war. convinced that humanity needed to be eliminated before they became too dangerous. Now his worst fears were coming true, but not in the way he had imagined. Humanity was not conquering territory or building an empire. They were simply proving that the Council could not protect its own members. Desperate and angry, Vex authorized the use of the Council's most powerful weapon. The Stellar Lance was a station-mounted energy beam capable of sterilizing entire planets. It had been built as a deterrent never meant to be used. But Vex's logic was brutal and simple. If humanity would not come out of hiding, destroy something they cared about. Destroy Earth itself. The mission was given to Admiral Corvus personally. 6 months after the silent departure began, a Council battle group arrived at Earth. The Stellar Lance was towed into position, its massive structure slowly moving into orbit around humanity's abandoned homeworld. Corvus knew humans might be watching. Part of him hoped they were. This was about sending a message that could not be ignored. The Council was still the dominant power in the galaxy. Cross them, and even your homeworld would burn. As the Stellar Lance began its charging sequence, drawing enormous amounts of energy from Earth's sun, Corvus broadcast on all frequencies. His voice was cold and clear. This is Admiral Corvus of the Galactic Council. To the human forces watching, your homeworld will be destroyed in 1 hour unless you surrender immediately and reveal your locations. The age of human defiance ends today. Hidden in Earth's shadow, invisible to Council sensors, the human warship Retribution waited. Commander Danny Ward sat in his command chair, listening to the ultimatum. His crew was silent, waiting for orders. Every person on the bridge knew what Earth meant. It was their birthplace, their history, the world where humanity had evolved over millions of years. Danny closed his eyes briefly. He thought of Iowa, where he had grown up. Green fields and small towns now empty and about to be turned to ash. He thought of the billions of people who had once called Earth home. All of them were scattered across the galaxy now, waiting to see if their homeworld would survive. He opened his eyes and spoke quietly. Contact Admiral Brooks. Tell her it's time for Iron Resolve. Iron Resolve was the contingency plan for exactly this scenario. Humanity had known the Council might target Earth. They had prepared accordingly. The planet looked abandoned, but it was not undefended. Not even close. From seemingly empty space around Earth's orbit, 300 human warships decloaked simultaneously. They had been there all along, waiting in perfect silence. Advanced stealth technology had kept them hidden, their crews maintaining complete radio silence for months. Now they revealed themselves in a display of force that made Admiral Corvus freeze in shock. But that was not all. At the exact same moment across the entire galaxy, humanity's hidden bases went active. Every major Council facility that humans had mapped during their 3 centuries of quiet observation suddenly came under attack. Shipyards, command centers, supply hubs, communications arrays. The attacks were coordinated down to the second, striking simultaneously across thousands of light years. The Council's military infrastructure, which had seemed invincible, began to collapse under the assault. And at Earth, the battle for humanity's homeworld began. The fight lasted 6 hours. It was brutal and desperate, unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Council forces outnumbered the human defenders 4-1. They had more ships, more firepower, more resources. By every logical calculation, they should have won easily. But humanity did not fight logically. They fought with the ferocity of a species protecting everything they held sacred. Every human pilot knew that losing meant their homeworld would be destroyed. Every gunner knew that their families were watching from hidden colonies praying for victory. Every soldier understood that this was the moment that would define whether humanity survived or disappeared forever. The human ships moved in ways that seemed impossible. They took risks no sane commander would authorize. Damaged vessels rammed into enemy ships rather than retreat. Fighters with failing systems made suicide runs on priority targets. The defense of Earth was not just a battle. It was a statement written in fire and blood. Humanity would not surrender, not now, not ever. Danny Ward coordinated the defense from the Retribution, his ship taking hit after hit but refusing to fall back. When his weapon systems failed, he ordered his crew to use the ship itself as a weapon. When his engines were damaged, he used maneuvering thrusters to maintain position. When Admiral Corvus's flagship tried to move the Stellar Lance into firing position, Danny put the Retribution directly in its path. All power to forward shields, he ordered calmly. If they want to fire that weapon, they'll have to go through us first. His crew did not hesitate. They knew it meant certain death. They did it anyway, but they were not alone. Other human ships moved into position, creating a wall of vessels between the stellar lance and Earth. The Council forces tried to break through, tried to clear a path for their ultimate weapon. But for every human ship they destroyed, another moved to take its place. The turning point came when Captain Lisa Morgan's infiltration team, which had been inserted onto the stellar lance weeks earlier, activated their sabotage protocols. The massive weapons power systems overloaded in a cascade failure. The explosion was visible from the planet's surface. A new sun blooming in Earth's orbit for 3 seconds before fading to nothing. With their ultimate weapon destroyed and their forces taking catastrophic losses, the Council battle group began to retreat. Admiral Corvus, his flagship crippled and burning, gave the order to withdraw. As his surviving ships fled the system, he sent one final transmission. The Council will not forget this. You have made an enemy of the entire civilized galaxy. Danny Ward, exhausted and wounded but alive, responded simply, "We already had that enemy. We just made sure you knew it." When the last Council ship jumped away, Earth remained, scarred and damaged, with debris fields in orbit and fires burning in some cities from falling wreckage. But intact, humanity's homeworld had survived. Admiral Helen Brooks broadcast a message to every system in Council space. Her voice was firm and unyielding. Humanity offered peace. We sought only to leave quietly and build our own path among the stars. You chose to hunt us. You chose to threaten our home. Now you will learn what happens when you awaken a sleeping predator. This war ends when you acknowledge our independence. Until then, there is no sanctuary. There is no safety. There is only the cost of your arrogance. Across the galaxy, Council species listened to her words and felt something they had not experienced in 2,000 years. Fear. True, deep fear of an enemy they could not find and could not defeat. The war was far from over, but the balance had shifted. Humanity was no longer running. They were fighting back, and the Council was beginning to realize that they had made a terrible mistake when they decided to eliminate the humans. Part 4. Silent Departure of Humanity. And the stars braced for war. The months following the Battle of Earth were chaos for the Galactic Council. What had begun as a mission to bring humanity back under control had turned into a nightmare. Council forces could not find human bases. They could not predict human attacks. They could not even protect their own territory effectively. Reports flooded into Zentara Prime daily. A fuel depot destroyed in Corthan space. A communications relay sabotaged in the Draknor sector. An entire convoy vanished in neutral territory with no witnesses and no wreckage. Humanity was everywhere and nowhere, striking at will and disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. General Greg Parker's operations became legendary among both human and Council forces. His stealth carrier Shadow could appear in heavily defended systems, complete its mission, and vanish before anyone knew what had happened. He specialized in impossible raids, hitting targets that should have been unreachable. One week he destroyed a shipyard deep in Council core territory. The next week he sabotaged a command center 3 sectors away. His seemingly random attacks were actually carefully planned, each one designed to force the Council to spread their forces thinner, protecting more locations with fewer ships. But it was not just military targets. Human raiders began hitting economic infrastructure. Mining operations shut down when their equipment was destroyed. Trade routes became too dangerous to travel. Insurance costs for merchant vessels skyrocketed. The galactic economy, which had been stable for centuries, began to show cracks. The psychological warfare was even more devastating than the physical attacks. Council admirals went to sleep in secure facilities and woke to find messages left by human commandos on their personal computers. The messages were simple and terrifying. "We could have killed you. Remember that." High-ranking officials found their private communications intercepted and their secrets exposed. Military officers discovered that humans knew their tactical doctrines better than they did themselves. The message was clear. Humanity had spent 3 centuries studying the Council. They knew everything, and they could reach anyone, anywhere, anytime. The Council species began to fracture. The Corthan Dominion accused the Zentarans of incompetent leadership. The Draknor Empire demanded more ships to protect their territory, refusing to send forces to help other species. Smaller species began to question whether remaining in the council was worth the cost. Counselor Vex, who had pushed so hard for this war, found himself isolated and blamed. His calls for escalation were ignored. His demands for total war were rejected. The council was losing, and everyone knew that Vex's arrogance had led them into this disaster. Then humanity deployed something that changed everything. Captain Lisa Morgan, a brilliant specialist in cyber warfare, had spent months developing a digital weapon. She called it the Blackout virus. It was designed to infiltrate the council's central communication network, the massive system that connected every council world and facility. The virus spread silently through the network for weeks, copying itself into every connected system. When Lisa activated it, the effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The entire council communication network went dark. No military communications, no navigation data, no coordination between fleets, nothing. For 72 hours, galactic civilization descended into chaos. Ships could not contact their commanders. Planetary governments could not reach their colonies. The carefully organized structure that held the council together simply stopped working. Admiral Corvus found himself commanding a fleet that could not coordinate, defend targets he could not contact, and fight an enemy he could not locate. Some council species panicked and recalled their ships to defend their homeworlds. Others tried to continue operations but ended up attacking their own allies by mistake. The confusion was total, and through it all, human forces operated perfectly, using quantum encrypted communications that the virus could not touch. When the systems finally came back online after 72 hours, there was a message waiting on every screen in council space. It appeared on military displays, civilian computers, government terminals, and personal devices. Billions of beings across the galaxy read the same word simultaneously. We could have made this permanent. We chose mercy. Choose wisdom. The message was signed simply. Humanity. The demonstration was brilliant in its brutality. Humanity had proven they could cripple the entire council civilization if they chose to. The economy, the military, the government, everything depended on the communication network. And humanity had just shown they could turn it off like a light switch. The council's leadership met in emergency session. For the first time in 2,000 years, they faced an enemy they could not defeat through military force. Every strategy they tried failed. Every attack was countered. Every defense was penetrated. Humanity had spent centuries preparing for this war, and it showed. The Zentaran High Command calculated the losses. In 6 months of fighting, the Council had lost 40,000 warships. Their economy had contracted by 30%. Trade had collapsed. Member species were threatening to leave. The cost of continuing the war was becoming unbearable. Meanwhile, human casualties were significantly lower. They fought smart instead of fair, choosing when and where battles happened. They used superior technology, better intelligence, and more flexible tactics. Every engagement favored them because they only fought when they had the advantage. But there was another factor that the Council had not considered. Human morale remained high because they knew exactly what they were fighting for. Survival, independence, the right to exist without permission from species that wanted them dead. That kind of motivation made humans willing to take risks and make sacrifices that Council soldiers would never accept, Admiral. Helen Brooks watched the intelligence reports from her command. Center in the Kepler abyss, the Council was breaking. Not quickly, but inevitably. Like a dam with too many cracks, the pressure was building. Soon something would give. They'll ask for negotiations soon, she said to her staff. They have no choice. The war is costing them everything, and they're gaining nothing. Commander Danny Ward, still recovering from wounds suffered at Earth, nodded agreement. Do we accept? On our terms only, Helen said firmly. Complete independence. No council authority over human space. No oversight. No restrictions. They wanted to eliminate us. Instead, they're going to acknowledge us as a sovereign power. They'll never agree to that, General Greg Parker said. It means admitting defeat, Helen smiled coldly. Then we keep bleeding them until they do. We can fight this war for decades if necessary. They cannot. Their economy is collapsing. Their unity is fracturing. Their member species are losing faith. Time is on our side. She pulled up a star map showing council space. Red indicators marked recent human attacks. There were hundreds of them, scattered across the entire galaxy. Every day we continue, we grow stronger and they grow weaker. Eventually, they'll realize that making peace is their only option, and if they decide to try one more massive offensive, Danny asked. Then we show them what the Nova Protocol can do, Helen said quietly, and pray we never have to use it. The room fell silent. Everyone present understood what the Nova Protocol represented. It was not just a weapon. It was a promise of mutual destruction so complete that even mentioning it was frightening. If the Council pushed humanity to the breaking point, if they tried to achieve through overwhelming force what they could not achieve through strategy, then humanity would ensure that victory cost more than the entire galaxy was worth. But Helen hoped it would not come to that. She hoped the Council would see reason before that final line was crossed, because using the Nova Protocol would not save humanity. It would only ensure that their enemies did not survive to celebrate their victory. The war continued. Human raiders struck deeper into Council territory. Economic pressure mounted, political tensions increased, and slowly, inevitably, the Council's leadership began to accept a truth they had tried to deny. They could not win this war. Not against an enemy who had spent 3 centuries preparing for it. Not against a species who would sacrifice everything rather than submit. Not against humans who had proven they would rather burn the galaxy down than allow themselves to be exterminated. The age of the Council's absolute authority was ending. And humanity, the species they had underestimated so completely, was the force that would end it. Part 5, Silent Departure of Humanity. And the stars braced for war. 12 months after the silent departure began, the Galactic Council finally admitted what everyone already knew. They had lost the war, not through a single decisive battle, but through the slow realization that continuing to fight would destroy them completely. The economic damage was catastrophic. Trade between Council species had dropped by 60%. Unemployment was rising on every member world. Governments faced riots and protests from populations demanding an end to the war. The military losses were staggering. 70,000 warships destroyed, hundreds of thousands of soldiers killed. And for what? Humanity was still free, still fighting, still winning. But the psychological damage was perhaps the worst. For 2,000 years, the Council had been the undisputed authority in the galaxy. No one questioned their power. No one challenged their decisions. Now, a single species had proven that the Council could be defeated, that their mighty fleets could be outmaneuvered, that their vast resources could be wasted, that their unity could be shattered. Other species watched and learned. If humanity could stand against the Council and survive, perhaps they could too. Whispers of independence spread through the smaller member species. The Council's authority, once absolute, began to erode. The final blow came from an unexpected direction. The Corthan Dominion, one of the Council's founding members, announced they were withdrawing their fleets to defend their own territory. They did not officially leave the Council, but they made clear they would no longer participate in the war against humanity. The message was obvious. The cost was too high, and the Corthans refused to pay it anymore. Within days, 3 other major species made similar announcements. The Great Unification Fleet, which had begun with 200,000 warships, now numbered barely 80,000. And those that remained were spread thin, trying to defend too many systems with too few ships. Admiral Corvus stood before the Council leadership in a closed session. His uniform was perfect, but his face showed the strain of months of losing battles. "We cannot win this war through military force," he said bluntly. "Humanity is too well prepared, too well hidden, and too determined. Every strategy we attempt, they counter. Every attack we launch, they evade. Every victory we achieve, they turn into a defeat through their response. I recommend we negotiate peace immediately, on whatever terms they will accept." Councillor Vex rose to object, but he was shouted down. His influence had died with the Stellar Lance. No one wanted to hear his demands for escalation anymore. The Council had followed his advice into disaster. Now they would follow someone else. The decision was made. The Council would seek peace. The message was sent to all known human channels. The Galactic Council requests formal negotiations to end hostilities. "We are prepared to discuss terms." The response came from Admiral Helen Brooks 3 days later. She named the location, a neutral system that both sides could reach safely. She named the date, giving the Council 2 weeks to prepare. And she named the terms: complete human independence and sovereignty, Council recognition of human territorial claims, freedom for any species that wished to join humanity's new government, and reparations for the unprovoked war the Council had started. The terms were harsh, but the Council had no leverage to negotiate anything better. They had started the war expecting an easy victory. Instead, they had created an enemy that had humbled them completely. The negotiations took place on a small station in empty space. Admiral Helen Brooks led the human delegation. With her were Commander Danny Ward, General Greg Parker, and Captain Lisa Morgan. The four of them represented humanity's military might, the force that had brought the mighty Council to its knees. Across the table sat what remained of the Council's leadership. Admiral Corvus represented the military. High Minister Prell represented the diplomatic corps. And Councillor Vex, diminished but still present, represented the hardline faction that still wanted war. Helen spoke first. Her voice was calm but unyielding. We will agree to a ceasefire under the following terms. First, humanity is granted full independence and sovereignty. No council jurisdiction, no oversight, no interference of any kind. Second, you will acknowledge that the outer rim sectors now belong to humanity. All council forces will withdraw from these regions immediately. Third, any species that wishes to join humanity's commonwealth is free to do so without council retaliation or punishment. Fourth, the council will pay reparations for the destruction caused by this war. Councillor Vex's voice was bitter. And if we refuse? Danny Ward leaned forward. Then we continue what we've been doing. But without restraint. We've shown mercy, Councillor. We've disabled ships when we could have destroyed them. We've targeted infrastructure when we could have targeted populations. We've fought a limited war because we hoped you would see reason. Refuse our terms and we'll show you what humanity looks like when we stop holding back. There was a long silence. Everyone in the room understood the threat. Humanity had been fighting carefully, trying to minimize casualties even among their enemies. They had avoided civilian targets, focused on military objectives, and tried to make the war as bloodless as possible given the circumstances. But that was a choice, not a limitation. If pushed further, humanity could wage total war. And after 12 months of defeats, the Council knew they could not survive that. High Minister Prell spoke carefully. We accept your terms. The Council recognizes human independence and sovereignty. We will withdraw from the territories you claim, and we will pay the agreed reparations. We ask only that this peace be permanent, that both sides commit to coexistence rather than continued conflict. Helen nodded. We have no desire for war, Minister. We never did. We only wanted to live freely, without fear that the Council would eliminate us the moment we became inconvenient. Give us that, and you have our peace. The Treaty of New Hope was signed 3 days later. The name was humanity's suggestion, a reminder that this peace represented a new beginning for galactic civilization. The Council's absolute authority had ended. In its place would be a more balanced system, where power was shared and independence was respected. The immediate effects were dramatic. 17 species, mostly smaller ones that had chafed under Council rule, announced they were leaving to join humanity's commonwealth. They were species that had watched humanity stand up to the galaxy's greatest power and win. That courage inspired them to seek their own freedom. The commonwealth that humanity formed was different from the Council. There was no central authority demanding obedience. Instead, it was a voluntary alliance of independent species working together for mutual benefit. Each species kept their sovereignty. Each one made their own decisions. They cooperated because they wanted to, not because they were forced to. In the months that followed, humanity began the long process of returning home. Earth was repaired and repopulated. The 12 abandoned systems filled with life again, but millions of humans chose to remain in the new colonies, the worlds they had settled during the Exodus. Humanity had expanded their territory significantly, and their population was spreading across dozens of systems instead of just 12. Jake Morrison, now promoted to Admiral, stood once again on the observation deck of Earth Defense Station. The planet below was healing, slowly becoming the vibrant world it had been before the silent departure. Ships moved between Earth and the orbital stations, carrying supplies and people in both directions. Helen Brooks joined him, looking older but satisfied. "Did you ever think it would actually work?" she asked. Jake shook his head. "Honestly, I thought we'd all be dead by now. The plan was insane. Evacuating an entire species, starting a war with the most powerful government in the galaxy, gambling everything on our ability to fight and win. It was desperation, not strategy. Sometimes desperation is the best strategy, Helen said with a slight smile. We spent 300 years being underestimated. We let them think we were weak, mediocre, nothing special. And when they finally noticed us, they found out we'd been preparing the whole time. Patience can be more powerful than strength. Below them, another colony ship departed, this one carrying volunteers to a new world in the Outer Rim. Humanity was expanding, growing, building a civilization that would span hundreds of systems. The future that had seemed impossible a year ago was now becoming reality. What do you think happens next? Jake asked. The Council won't forget this. Some species will hold grudges for generations. Let them, Helen said calmly, as long as they remember the lesson. Humanity cannot be eliminated easily. We will not submit to authority we did not choose, and we will fight for our freedom no matter the cost. As long as they remember that, we'll have peace. She paused, looking out at the stars. And if they forget, we'll teach them again. The galaxy had changed. The age of the Council's absolute authority was over. The age of the human commonwealth had begun. And throughout known space, species that had once accepted Council rule without question began to ask themselves a dangerous question. If humanity could be free, why could they not be free as well? The answer to that question would reshape galactic civilization in ways no one could predict. But for now, humanity had won what they had fought.